when I was doing drugs and my parents both kicked me out, I was diagnosed with clinical depression very young. I was struggling. I was lost. I was a kid that needed help. It took me a long time to realize that I was so angry. So I think last time we spoke, was it a month?
It hasn't been too long.
Yeah, time just disappearing in a minute. But I think I flew to the UK, did my first TEDx talk, and just did my first South by Southwest presentation.
Right. Does it feel crazy to be going around and speaking like that?
Yeah, it was weird because I still consider myself a new speaker. I think because I'm surrounded by so many people who are so accomplished that I put so much pressure on myself to be experienced, but I'm still very young and I'm still new to this. So I put that pressure on myself and I forget that I'm still learning. But when I went and did the TEDx, it was the biggest audience that I'd done. I think it was 2,500, 3-tiered theater. But it felt really good. Yeah. It felt right. It felt comfortable in a weird way. We went out on stage before. It was at lunchtime, so everybody was out at lunch and before my talk. And me and the other speakers, we just went and made jokes on stage to try and put positive energy there. So when we went on stage, it wasn't the first time we'd been there. We felt that positive emotion. We got that positive context effect. And after the speech, I wanted to do it again.
Really?
Go off stage and I'm like, I'm ready. Who wants me to do their speech? I'm ready to do it again.
Really?
Yeah, it felt great.
That's a lot of people. How many people did you say?
I think it was 2,500.
Speaking in front of 600, that's the most.
Even that is a lot.
Yeah,
anything more than 100, I think, feels really daunting.
Right. I feel like when the bigger it gets, I don't know, it's just less, not in a bad way, it's just like less personal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're not, if I'm speaking to a room of 20 people, 30, 50 or whatever, I'm still able to kind of like zero in, see their faces, their facial expressions.
Yeah.
Once it's that big and that vast, then usually lights are on you. It's dark out there. You're on more of a stage now, so there's not that connection. And then there's also like, is what I'm saying landing right now? Or
yeah, because you can't see anything. Right. I remember they said when you go out, you won't be able to see the audience. And it really was just dark because the lights are so bright. But I knew that my dad and sister were in the audience. So it kind of felt like I was just presenting to them. Really? Like the rest of the audience just disappeared and I was just presenting to them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. Are you talking about this one or the TEDx?
The TEDx.
Okay.
Yeah, this one was, we were teaching a workshop, and that was, I think, 42 was the limit that we had. We had people in the waiting room, but we had 42.
Okay. So you're in town speaking in South by Southwest. What exactly, and what are you up there speaking about, doing workshops with?
Social engineering. So we taught about the psychology of human vulnerability, and we taught deception detection, cognitive bias, and how attackers exploit that, how to protect against it, and nonverbal communication.
So dumb that down, like way, way, way down. Like what, on street level, what are you up there talking about? Like when you say you're using a lot of big terminology.
So
I understand it all, but just in case somebody else that might be listening might not understand it.
Yeah, I think academics, we speak in code sometimes. So social engineering is, you get like a phone call or a text message or an email, and it says that they're the IRS or the Royal Mail, and it's actually an attacker who forges that email to get you to click on it, or it create a fake phone call to get you to do something that isn't in your best interest. So our company, Social Engineer, were hired by organizations to break into buildings, to phish, vish, and smish, which is to text their staff, so that we can teach them how the bad guys do it and protect against it. Really? So we were teaching how the bad guys exploit vulnerabilities in human thinking, because the brain has a limited cognitive capacity. So attackers will use manipulation and use things like creating an overload in your cognitive capacities to reduce critical thinking to then get you to do acts. We were teaching the psychology of that and then how you can protect against it.
Right. So when you're saying attackers, my mind immediately goes to physical attackers, but you're talking about just attackers in a general sense, whether that's online or any of that type of stuff.
Yeah, so physical, someone who is trying to break into a building. They're pretending to be pest control, but really they have a USB stick that they want to steal documents, or usually it's a money thing. Usually they get you to click a link on an email, and then it's a malicious link, and then they have access to your details, so your bank details, passwords. So those are the kind of threat actor. They want information or they want money.
So for Christmas, my wife makes Christmas cookies and she'll send them out to the family. And so everybody got their cookies this year. My mom and my stepdad, they were the only ones that didn't get their cookies. They got lost in the mail. Mm-hmm. So my mom, being my mom, is still right now trying to track down this lost package of these Christmas cookies that are for sure, not good by now.
Yeah.
But just the other day, she had gotten an email and it said for like 31 cents they can get her package back and all that. And she clicked on it and then went to the post office to pick it up, and they're like, no, that's a scam. Yeah. So like, what does she need to be on the lookout for now? Or like somebody that this has happened to, stuff like that. What do they need to do once that happens?
So when it's an email, often what they do is play on things like emotion. They obviously been tracking her activity, so they saw that it was relevant. So when that happens, when we see anything with a link, we have to engage critical thinking. And usually something like the web page is spelled slightly wrong, or the email doesn't come from a genuine email. But because it was availability bias, she's like, oh, this makes sense with my situation. She just clicked on it without looking for those details. So anytime there is a link, just take a step back and think, is everything here correct? Is this email legitimate? And I always say the best thing to do is breathe for 10 seconds. Because what happens when we get an email or a text or anything that says it's, say, you need to act now, like you get an IRS email or something that plays on emotion, it activates the emotional center of the brain. And when those are activated, we're not engaging in critical thinking. Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of step back, because it takes a few seconds to engage the prefrontal cortex, which is where critical thinking occurs. So it's like when you write an email angry, you're not critically thinking. You have to step away, let the prefrontal cortex come in, and then you reread it. Because now you might go back to that email and think, that's obviously a fake email. Mm-hmm. They didn't, sign it professionally. There was no logo. They say they're Royal Mail, but where's the Royal Mail logo? Those things you notice when you're critically thinking. Right. When you just act on impulse, you don't. Yeah. So that would be my best advice. Take a step back and breathe for 10.
So when I sit there and say something like, oh, I need to process this, is that what's literally happening? Is I'm waiting for it to get to my prefrontal cortex? Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So normally with your book and everything, a lot of what we talked about before was shame-based. And a lot of what you post in that. And so, forgive me because I'm not educated in this. How is that? Basically, your field is the brain and how it works, why it works.
So
with the emotions?
It's interesting you say that, because when I said to everybody that I have a book being published, everyone was like, oh, great, information elicitation. My PhD was in psychology, information elicitation, nonverbals. That's what everybody assumed. Mm. And we work with a lot of people from FBI, Secret Service, and they'd messaged and said, can't wait for this to come out. We're going to use the information. And I had to say, sorry, everybody, you're going to be really disappointed. I have a second book coming out, which is in all of that. It's called The Upper Hand, about how to gain influence and how to gain information. But the first book, Work in Progress, was a passion project for me. It's not even a field that I actively work in. I volunteer a lot, and I do run a blog called The Doctor's Corner, where I teach trauma recovery and things like that. So it's relevant to that, but it's not relevant to anything I do in my 9-to-5 kind of work.
Okay.
It's all psychology related. Right. But I noticed when I was struggling with my shame and my trauma, and I was reading all these self-help books, none of them work. Mm-hmm. And I know human behavior well enough that when I was reading these, I was like, these aren't consistent. That's not how human beings actually work. I mean, they're great. You read them and you feel empowered and think, great, for a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read this, I'm going to be bulletproof. Well, that's not how we work. Right. So I realized there was this gap, and what I did was turn to the literature, and I tried to get myself out of a bad situation by removing myself from the equation and just thinking, what would I tell someone else? And through that, I learned a lot. And my book was that passion project. I didn't want another person to be sat in that position that I was in, seeking help and support and going to places that we think are the right places, these online courses, these self-help books, and all they're getting is false promises. And it's not actually helpful in the long run, because it's not appealing to say, when someone says, is it going to be okay? And you go, no, it's not going to be okay, but we have to be okay with that. It's much more comforting to go, everything's going to be
Yeah.
You're going to be bulletproof. It's all going to be good. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to communicate the real science, and I wanted to help people in that way. So that first book was that passion project that came from that.
Gotcha. And if you don't mind me saying, the first time you came on, for those who haven't maybe seen the first episode, you were gracious enough to come on and share your personal experience. You had some stuff go on in your world that are familiar to my world, with some substance abuse and all that, and it's crazy to talk with somebody, you know what I mean, of your education level and what you do for a living, because it just goes to show you that the addiction or any of that doesn't discriminate. It can get a hold of anybody, and luckily it seems like you're smart enough in saying, like, digging into the literature, finding out why I am the way I am, what was it that conditioned me that way. But if anybody hasn't heard that first episode, please go listen to it, because it's very very inspirational, very impactful. And now you get to use that first-hand experience to help people.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I think that it's not that addiction doesn't touch people in certain careers, it's that they don't talk about it.
Right.
Because there's a shame involved. And because they're now in that sector, particularly in the private sector, they go, well, I have to hide this part of myself. I can't openly talk about it. So I think there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. People just don't want to talk about it. And that's also one of the reasons that I wrote the book, because people at a certain level can be honest. Once you've made it, you can say, I did these things, but you've made it. You're at the top of your game, you're the CEO, you're a celebrity, you're these things. It's not going to affect the progression of your career. If you're not at the top, it could affect your progression. Most of us aren't at the top. So when I'm not at the top, I'm trying to make my way still. So at this stage, it's the stage where I'm like, I have to hide those things, because they're going to subdue my progress. They're not going to get me where I want to be. But that isn't authentic. And what I found is I was subduing myself, because I was so afraid of those things coming out, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I had to accept myself. And if the honesty will stop me having opportunities that I otherwise would have had, then fine, so be it. I'll take other opportunities. But I think that's the problem, because people think that if I'm honest about this, it's going to stop me being able to progress, particularly in education or particularly in the private sector.
No, I agree with that. And luckily, working kind of in the recovery world, I see those people that, you know what I mean, when they come get help and all that. And I think I'm not sure if I told you the story before, but I've even sat down with the police department and talked with them openly, and they told me, like, we have as officers in inpatient treatment right now. We have officers that are suffering. They go home, they drink a bottle a night and all this. And that's not stuff, that particular career field. You're not going to hear people coming out and talking about that. And so just me in my world, knowing how freeing it is to be able to talk about that stuff and own it and then use it to help people and know the benefit in that, it makes me sad a little bit to know that there's people out there that don't feel that they can come forward or feel the repercussions and all that. My question I have for you is, how come, like, even me, life is not perfect. I'm sober 7 years, but I still go through stuff. I'm still dealing with stuff, marriage, personal life. And, just recently there was a couple weeks there where just everything in life was good. There was nothing bad going on or anything, but, like, I wasn't right. And I didn't know why. I wasn't happy. I wasn't excited. I didn't know what was going on. And I started, talking to my wife about maybe I need to go to therapy and all this. And, it was tough at first to, like, come to terms. It's like, man, I'm farther than I ever have been in life. What's going on? Why do I need this all of a sudden? Why do I obviously need something. And so I start talking about, childhood stuff and everything. And I wonder, my question for you is why, especially with me working with addicts every day, like, what, I know how freeing it is to be able to talk about my stuff, but there's still that need to, like, hold on to something here or there that I don't want to talk about because it's shameful, or, the the way I would think about it. Like, why are we as human beings still conditioned to be like that, even though we know the positive effect it can have by getting that stuff off and dealing with it?
It's so natural to try and self-preserve an image we have of ourselves. When we want to think positively of ourselves, what we do is we tend to, when we refer to the old versions of ourselves, we tend to exacerbate how bad they were and how much more we've changed, because we want to really feel like this version of me now is so much better. And if we have those slips, it really disrupts that self-image that we have, and it creates a confusion. The brain doesn't like confusion. The brain likes consistency. If I have these feelings, it's inconsistent with how I see myself. It creates what's called a cognitive dissonance, and we don't like that. We want to get rid of that. So it's so natural to want to push those behaviors and those feelings to the side. And when people say that, I feel ashamed of running from my shame, don't feel ashamed. It's natural, it's human to want to avoid those negative emotions because they hurt. Pain isn't nice. Negative feelings aren't nice. No matter how far you've come and how accepting you are of yourself, it's still uncomfortable. That's the thing. It doesn't get more comfortable. It's like grief. It doesn't get easier. It doesn't go away. The pain's still there. You just learn to deal with it. And when it comes to recovery, people forget that it doesn't go away when you recover. And people don't talk about that. They go, I've recovered. And they go, oh, you're past the recovery. Now, I would love to say that my worst period of my life was 10 years ago. I did have a slip up later on in university, a short one. And I'd love to say that was it. Even though you don't use, even though you're done with that, it doesn't go away. Right. My nervous system still feels it. And it's shameful to feel that way. And it's also a bit of embarrassment when you say it, because it makes you feel like a weak person. I'm not in control of all of these feelings. I'm not fully in control of myself and my behaviors. And that is shameful, and that can feel embarrassing. But it's like I watch things on TV, gangster movies and all of these things. As soon as drugs come in, my nervous system responds to it.
Really?
Even though I say so far back in my life, I don't want that. I don't want to ruin my life. But I know that I could, and my nervous system remembers feeling. So I have to take myself away. And to say that it's not a concern would be a lie.
Right.
I'd love to say I am 100% certain that never in my life ever again. I'm in such a good place in my life. But that would be a lie.
Right.
And I do worry. So my dad is my whole world. He really is everything to me. And he isn't in the best of health. We've had some really horrible periods where I thought I was going to lose him. And I worry that if I lose him, how easy it would be for me just to tear my life to pieces. There's no twice, there's once.
Yeah.
I do it once and I know I couldn't stop. And if I lost my dad, that is a concern for me. I hope that if that does happen, because one day eventually will, I have the strength to remind myself that isn't what he would want. And that's not what I've built for myself. But I can't say for certain.
Right.
I just hope that at that point, I'm strong enough. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to say that version, that weaker version of me is gone.
Right.
It's just strong me now. But we are all human.
Yeah. There's it's tough, especially when you're going with grief, because you want to feel better, you want to not feel all at the same
go away
all at the same time. And drugs, alcohol, it's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed and very lucky to have amazing people around me, and so I think I've definitely been through some stuff in recovery or in sobriety that I think and otherwise would have took me back out easily. But thank God I had kind of the support system around me to where that didn't happen. But I'm starting to get up there in age a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm 41. My parents are starting to get older. I have grandparents that are still alive, and so it's those thoughts are now starting to come. It's life is not forever. Life is short. And so for the first time in my life, I'm actually putting focus on spending quality time with people, contacting them. And this is not stuff I'd ever even thought about before. Probably because I was living such a selfish life. But Yeah, it's a very real thing. We're not here for long.
Yep, and we get wrapped up in the day-to-day, get wrapped up in our goals and our motivations that we forget those things.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is when it comes to addiction, even when part of us wants to stop, which always part of us wants to stop, a little part, and then part of us wants to continue, depending on which side is stronger, when the part that wants to continue outshines the other part, what we tend to do is we burn bridges.
Yeah.
This person could save me. So we try and break that relationship. I remember a few years ago, I was at a really dark place in my life. I was struggling with PTSD after my dad had his stroke. And I had gone through a few things that we'd spoken about the last podcast, and I hadn't really dealt with them. At that time in my life, I didn't have the emotional strength to deal with them. So I put them to the side. And then when my dad had his stroke, it was like everything that I'd hidden at the back of my mind just came over. And I was in such a dark place. And I didn't want to continue my life anymore. And I was so ready for it to be it. And I was really at the brink of suicide. And I didn't tell my family. And I didn't tell them for the reason that I knew they would save me. And that's what we do. We burn bridges, or we don't reach out to people because we know they could help us. And often if we're prone to self-destructive tendencies, it's not that I just don't reach out to them. That's the point where I now try and get them to disown me. I want them to not want to help me so that I now have the freedom to do what I want to do and to now ruin my life in peace.
That's heavy. What, I don't want to keep the topic on recovery for the whole time, but the addicts and alcoholics and people that I work with each day, they're all early in it. And so they're just starting to feel the shame, guilt, all the emotions that come with not having those substances in their life anymore to mask it all. What would you say, like, what, in your educated opinion, is the best way for them to start trying to deal with that shame?
Hard. You have to be prepared for it to hurt, because we go in thinking, I can do this. And those books, be bulletproof, you're going to be fine, it's all flowers and roses and ponies and it's going to be great. That isn't a realistic expectation. When you start to let those emotions in, saying to yourself, I'm going to crumble. Not I want to crumble, but I might crumble. This is going to be hard. It's going to be heavy. It's going to hurt. And there are going to be points where I break down and I'm weak, and then I get back up. And having those realistic expectations of it might not all be okay. It's going to really hurt. That is really important to humanize it and remember that we're human.
Right.
We are human, but you've got to have a drive in you. And there's this saying, time heals all wounds. And we think, I just have to get through today and the next day. And I just have to keep getting through it and it'll be fine. And I agree with that to a point. But the thing about time is it doesn't work unless we do. So if each day all you're doing is laying in bed and letting the day pass you by, fine, okay, for a little bit. And then you get up. We have to make active choices. And in a talk I recently did, people have this saying, fake it till you make it. And I kind of want to flip it on its head because I agree with it to a point, but feel the emotion, fake the behavior is what I say. Let those negative feelings come in. Let them overwhelm for a point. When your emotions are saying to stay in bed, don't do this. Keep dwelling on that. Listen to them, feel them, understand them, but don't let them control you. Fake the behavior. I want to stay in bed. My emotions say do this. I'm going to feel it, but I'm going to get up anyway.
Right.
And you have to actively choose. And it's hard. It isn't easy. And people say, where does the motivation come from? I'm not like you. I haven't got the motivation. We all do. We just choose to. We have to choose to. There is no secret to motivation. There's no pill you can take to make you motivated. You just have to get up.
Right.
But it's balance too. So when you say that, often people are like, there's a lot of speakers that will say, get up, do it, go to the gym. 1 a.m., go to the gym. Your legs are broken, get up, keep running.
Right.
And that isn't helpful either.
Mm-hmm.
There's balance. It's not so black and white. Sometimes that lay in your bed is helpful, but not always.
Yeah.
So that's why self-understanding comes in. And that's why we have to build emotional intelligence, because we have to recognize when our body is saying to us, I can't because I'm exhausted, versus I can't because I don't want to.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. And that comes with time. And that comes with understanding how emotions feel in the body, understanding our emotional reactions to things, understanding our triggers. It's time.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but with knowledge comes power.
Right. My mom's always said that my whole life. Knowledge comes power.
Yeah.
Why you guys are PhDs and I'm not. No. One thing you were saying about being willing to like start dealing with that shame. You know, I take a look at my life and my story, and you know, as a young person looking up to my father the way I did, and the people I chose to look up to were all like tough, hard guys. And then, you know, going into the military, like that is the culture. And so when it came time for me to start dealing with some of the things I need to deal with, I was unable. I didn't know how, because I still need to perpetrate this tough guy that it doesn't bury it deep down in. And you're Irish, like we don't deal with problems.
You just drink them away.
Yeah, and that's what happens. And so, you know, it was tough. It was tough doing it. Little did I know how freeing it would be. But it's still tough now, like you're saying, with the image, and none of it's real.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, the times and the talks I've given, the posts I've done, when I'm my most vulnerable and I'm willing to talk about those most vulnerable things that I don't want to talk about because they'll make me appear as not tough or this man or whatever it is, those are the things that do the best. Those are the things where I reach the most people, where I get the most people coming back to me talking about how important it was. And still, with all that proof and all that data, it's still hard for me to do.
Yeah. Yeah, people recognize authenticity, and we're surrounded by curated versions of everyone. All you have to do is look on Instagram and you see a curated version of people's lives. You see these perfect lives. You have these comparisons of people living these extraordinary lives. And it makes us feel small. And even a lot of the time when people post like before and afters, their before is some people's version of perfect. And a lot of the time they do that on purpose to be like, oh, I'm so much better now. Look how bad I was. And people create this image of perfection. And it really is so toxic. And it's so hard to want to step out and be authentic when we're constantly surrounded by, you need to be like this, you need to earn this amount of money, you need to do this, do this. It's so hard to be authentic when you're surrounded by inauthentic people and inauthentic things. And even when we do say to ourselves, okay, this is my true me, this is the authentic version of me, they're still in the back of our minds. Well, what if they won't accept me? Because we want to be accepted. It's human. It's not weak to want to be accepted. It's human. And people strive for this unemotional, uncaring, unbothered version. And we're painted as, you know, to be confident is to not care what people think. It's not true. To be human is to care what people think. The only way to reach non-caring is to remove emotions, is to be psychopathic. That is never the goal. You have to recognize it's going to hurt. And sometimes even when you think, I'm this authentic version of me, I don't care what strangers on the internet say, you comment and it just hits you in a nerve. We are all human. And there's no secret either. There's no secret to developing a thicker skin. It's just when you wake up and you know, I was honest today, I was authentic today, that is enough to know that although I feel uncomfortable with who I have been, I'm growing into someone that my daily behavior makes me feel comfortable with who I am. That is the goal. Just feeling comfortable with the way you treat yourself and the way you treat others. I don't think there is a secret to it. There's no quick fix. It's uncomfortable, and getting comfortable with discomfort is the only way.
Right. The only thing that's ever worked or helped me was getting healthy, getting into the gym, starting to run.
Yeah.
Those are the only things. when I got into running, that's when I started, the documentary came out. That's when I started speaking, but I still wasn't like confident when I was speaking. You know what I mean? I could still walk into a room and I didn't have that presence, or didn't believe at that time I had the ability to grab people's attention. Because it felt like stepping back out into the world. It was like doing it naked. I don't have my substance anymore to protect me. Yeah. That's what made me not care what people think. But now that's all I could think about is, what does everybody think about me? What are they thinking about the words that are coming out of my mouth, or what I'm saying? Yeah. Is it landing? Do they think I'm crazy? All those intrusive thoughts. And so then, I got into the gym, and by no means am I saying that I'm not bulletproof. Things still hurt and all that, but now I carry myself in a much different way, because I was willing to kind of put myself in that uncomfortability and build myself up, because I was so ashamed of who I was. Yeah. And it's like, I see people up here, and that's where I want to be. Yeah. And so working that up, and it transformed my life. But like you're saying, like, it's still, comments still hurt, people's words still hurt, all that stuff. But what it did for me was it made me finally okay to be me. Yeah. I know no matter what, like a relationship, right? A relationship I was in early recovery, that ended, and it hurt me bad. I was questioning myself, everything like that. And that was before I had kind of gotten into the gym life. And so then when I got into the gym life and all that, then I had relationships after that. And the relationships were so much different, because now it wasn't me like, I need you, I need this relationship, I need to be loved. Now, all of a sudden, I'm good being me. And though I want you in my life, though it would hurt if you did leave my life, no matter what, I'm going to be okay, because finally I have the confidence to be proud and to be okay to be me. And so it didn't give me complete confidence to make me untouchable, but it did change it for me significantly.
And people often use relationships as an escape when they don't feel good about themselves. It creates a barrier between them and healing. I don't have to focus on this healing, these things that hurt, because I can focus my energy on this person. So people escape through relationships, and then they cling to it. And I always say, hold, don't squeeze. And when it's like, imagine you have a little baby bird in your hand. Hold it, keep it safe, squeeze it. And that's what we tend to do when we're in unhealthy relationships. Try and squeeze them. Don't leave me because I can't be without you. And that's when you make people feel suffocated. Yep. And it's like, when you want anything, go for it, but don't squeeze it. Right. Don't go full throttle like that, because that's not a healthy way to be. And what I find is people often think that they've healed from their past selves. And what you did is you looked directly at yourself and you faced it. You really faced that shame. But what people tend to do is they breeze over it. They stop engaging in the behaviors, so they think they've healed, but they haven't actually got to the cause. They've just treated the symptoms. I've stopped doing those behaviors now. Symptoms have gone away. I'm healed. I'm fine. So now they create this new version of themselves. That old version of themselves is still there. It's still behind the walls, and that thing that created it is still in you untreated. So later on, it can come back. And that's where you see a lot of issues later on, not facing their shame. They've said, I've moved on from it. You haven't faced it, though. You haven't really dealt with the emotions, dealt with the reasons. You're just running from it. You are still running from that version of yourself. And we can treat the symptoms all of our life and think we're healthy, but we're not. Our nervous system is still responsive. And I remember something that was said to me, because when I was doing drugs really young, my life wasn't there. I was kicked out of college, which I don't know what it's called in America, but it was when I was 15, 16. So that stage I was kicked out, and my parents had kicked me out.
Wait a minute, you don't know what's called being in college in 15 or 16? Remarkable is what it's called over here.
So college, I think we call uni what you call college. Okay. So I'm not sure what you call it at the age 15, 16.
High school?
Yes, yeah, okay. High school.
All right.
So at that point in my life, I was kicked out. And my parents had both kicked me out, and they didn't communicate. So my mum didn't know that my dad had kicked me out. My dad didn't know that my mum had completely kicked me out. So I was living with friends. And I was just in this relationship, and I was so unhappy. And that was a really, really dark place in my life. And then when I got myself together, I moved on. I got my undergrad, I got a scholarship for my PhD, I became a doctor, I did all these things. But I hadn't really healed from it. I just created a new version. So what I had done is I'd hidden from it because now I liked this new version. And I remember someone said to me, who are you? And I've always said, you can't separate me from my job. There is no me without psychology. And they said, but take it away. And I said, if you take that away from me, I'm nothing. And I remember she said, but you are something underneath. The reason that you feel like you're not is because when I take that educated you away, what's underneath is a hurt person, is an unhealed, unhappy person. And all you're doing is using knowledge, education to shield you from that version of yourself. And I really had to sit with that. And I was really like, no, that's not true. Because I like this Dr. Abbie, this non-drug addict Abbie. I don't like her.
Right.
But I like this version. And when you take that away, it's like, well, what if that other version sneaks back in? What if there's still part of that in me? And there is. There will always be part of those versions in me because we never truly shed those. We don't shed our skin like a snake. We're just not built that way. There will always be those bits in me. But I just decide what parts of me I allow to take over. And when in recovery, you have to do that. And what I realized is I really have to get uncomfortable because I have to move the parts of me I like out the way for now and look at the parts of me I don't like and understand them. It's not enough just to go, yep, that was bad. How do I be better? Why did I do it? What drove me to in the first place? Because if that is left unhealed, you might do it again. And that new version of you is never going to be authentic because it's an escape. And I thought, there's no way I'm escaping through education. But I was. Because now this is someone that, people can accept it. And I realized I was doing that with speeches too. I would never put in my personal story. And people would always say, you have no personality. Everyone just thought
people would tell you that?
Always.
Really?
Yeah, I was just a working robot. Okay. And I was because I didn't let my personality come through. Everything was so professional all the time. Because you can't insult science. If you say, I don't like that, I'm like, great, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's a scientific study. It doesn't upset me. But if my personality comes through and I do a talk about me and you don't like that, now I can be hurt by it because I'm not shielded by the science. So we often do that with medals or awards or achievements. It doesn't hurt me because I've got this thing. We're shielding ourselves from it. Move those. What's underneath? Who are you when your achievements, when your job, when your role is moved out the way? What is underneath that? Understand them and learn to like that version of you.
Right. Very deep. Very profound, but very deep. So someone listening to this, let's say they're dealing with tremendous amounts of shame and they've come to terms that they know they need to deal with it. What should their first steps be? They go get a therapist? They go to a church? Like, what should they do?
I think seeking social support.
Yeah.
Because we have a tendency to say, I can do this by myself. And even when you think that you have, having social support, particularly a professional. Now, if you have had trauma, always a professional. Because they're going to ask you questions in a controlled environment. And trauma, for something to be considered traumatic, it has to exceed the standard parameters of what we are emotionally equipped to deal with. So if you just dive in head first, you can overwhelm yourself. And there's just no shame in therapy. There's no shame in help whatsoever. Most therapists have therapists. It's tough. It is hard dealing with emotions. No shame in support, no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter your sex, gender, your education. We are all human. Seeking help is really the first step because it helps us. And I say a clinician can't do the work for you. They can't make those steps. But what they can do is show you where to safely step. Because if we don't have the education, we don't have that understanding, and not all of us can turn to the literature. I had that advantage being a scientist, that I knew where to look. And even that, I ended up later on figuring out that all the steps I made were completely wrong. And we don't have that. So having someone say, step here because there's a landmine over here. And if you had done that yourself, maybe you opened a box that at that stage in your life was just not ready to be opened. Because again, there's a tendency to say that I'm going to deal with everything all at once. No shame in saying, I can't deal with this right now. I've had to do that at points in my life. After the assault, I wasn't in a stage of my life where I could deal with that. My dad had just been diagnosed with some pretty difficult health issues. And if I had dealt with that at that point, I truly don't think I would have made it. For me to say I have too much going on right now, let me shelf it. I'm not pretending it's gone. I'm going to deal with it later. And I recognize that this needs to be dealt with, but at this stage, I just can't. That's okay too. And a therapist can help you say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this. Just going to put it here for a second. I'm going to work on these things. Because if you try and do everything at once, it's like when you've got all the grocery bags, you're trying to do one trip. And what you end up doing is dropping things on the way. Yeah. Do it all in one trip. Or when you have a arm full of washing. And I do this all the time. I won't go back and I just leave a trail of washing. Why don't I just do 2 trips?
Right.
And we do that. We do that with our emotions. We try and do all of it at once. And it overwhelms us. We can't carry it all. A professional will be able to help us say, this is what we're going to deal with right now. That other stuff, we're going to come to it. We just need to build this strength first. And that's so hard to do by yourself.
Yeah. You said something earlier. I'm trying to go back to it. When dealing with a therapist or going to talk to people, like the importance of being able to find the right person to do that with and know.
Yeah.
Because there's so much of it. It's like, are they going to tell people, or are they going to this, or are they going to that? But when you get a good one, like you watch the difference that it makes with people. I like what you're saying about the compartmentalizing because, I've said before, I've had these couple weeks where it's like everything's going good. Why do I not feel great? And I think I'm so excited and so happy with everything I'm doing in my life. I don't ever take a break from it.
Yeah.
So I just go, and I get all wrapped up into it. And I think that's what it was. Like I needed to take a step back and disconnect for a little while because I was just going to run myself right into the ground. And so
worry.
Right.
When things are going good, we have a tendency to go, it's called counterfactual thinking. What if? Mm-hmm. And you think everything's great. What if I ruin it? Mm-hmm. What if I slip back? What if, and I have a tendency to think, what if it's taken away from me? Mm-hmm. Because all through my life, I've had things taken. We didn't grow up with money, and I had my sense of safety in myself taken from me by someone else. So every time I get something good, my brain goes, what if it's taken from me? And I know when I achieve things, until it's in my hand, until it's done, I think it's going to go away. Because, especially if we've experienced loss, because we know this tendency of it's just going to be taken from us and it's not fair. So often when good things happen, we think, what if someone takes it? What if the world takes it from me? And then that leads into this thinking again of what if? What if something ruins it? And then we ruin it for ourselves. We don't mean to. We don't go in, I'm going to ruin this thing. But we get so worried and we try and squeeze. We try and keep it in our hand. Hold it, don't squeeze. Because we start to ruin the good things by worrying about the good things being ruined.
Right. What does somebody do? Like, not everybody is, all the people that don't get to see this podcast or aren't lucky enough to sit down with you like I am, like, what does somebody do when they're not equipped with that knowledge and they're just trying to go about life? Like, how can you be successful in that with these emotions and everything?
So seeking knowledge, I think there's so much available to us now. We're so lucky to be in a time where there's so much education available. And with that comes its own problems, because you go on TikTok and there's thousands of so-called experts promoting really unhelpful and invalid suggestions. But looking at, educated individuals with the degrees in the topics that they're talking about, courses. Harvard and Yale do a lot of free courses. There's so much information in podcasts and books and articles. You can go on Google Scholar. I mean, they take some education. Google Scholar is where you can find academic articles, but a lot of people don't go there because they're not approachable academic articles. But podcasts, there are so many scientists and so many practitioners that give out free information. We just have to be willing to seek it. And, Googling, okay, who are the top professionals in this field? Where can I read their information? Where can I read their book? Where can I listen to their stuff? That takes initiative to go and seek out. But that is really important. And there's so much free help now. Really are living in the world of information. But being mindful as well of the platforms that we go on. So getting information from TikTok isn't always helpful. There are a lot of creators. I think I've just got a TikTok now. I've just started it to try and put out some science. And I see a lot of other creators talking about some fantastic things. And being selective over who you follow. And I follow a lot of educational Instagrams, and I'm always really shocked. They these posts out and I think, wow, what fantastic information they're sending out in a really bite-sized way. And that, when you find that, it's great, really engaging to learn with. So really being selective with those kinds of things and looking at who is presenting the information, and do they have a conflict of interest? So are they presenting information and then saying, buy my course in this? And does it seem too good to be true? You listen to this, you buy this course, you're going to be shame-free. Wow, that's enticing. Think about it. Does that sound realistic?
Right.
Because someone who understands the food will never say that. Those promises, very cautious not to make those kinds of sweeping statements, because all you're doing is setting people up for disappointment. So seeking out that knowledge is definitely the first step.
Right. As you're saying all that, my mind immediately goes to like the working out piece, and the same applies.
Yeah.
Because it was the first topic in my life where like I couldn't get enough information. I wanted to soak it all up, and then luckily I was intuitive enough to realize like, all right, I need to find like good science-based people.
Yeah.
Because I need to forego the sexiness of like this guy, like you're gonna look like him, and it's all, you know what I mean? It's more theatrical than it is educational. And then a lot of times in those theatrical, it's attached to buy my supplements, buy this, buy that, buy my program. And then there's other guys, men and women that are putting out like good educational information, and that's what I always gravitated towards. So I think we are very lucky in this time to have access to that like quick. But there's just so much of it out there, and being able to find the right stuff by the right people that speak to you, because there's going to be different teaching styles too. Yeah. And I might learn really well with this style, but I don't learn with this style, and not being able to be discouraged and be like, oh, well, I didn't find what I needed to on the first one, so I'm not looking anymore.
Yep. And I like what you said about initiative too, because even in the literature, especially psychology, nothing is ever 100%. And you can go on Instagram and see one very, very well-established athlete say one thing is bad, and another very well-established athlete say, no, that thing is great. Yeah. Because nothing is ever 100%. We still don't fully understand the human body, and what works for one person might not work for another. Same with psychology. So it's not, okay, well, they're completely wrong, they're completely right. It's not quite that simple. And that can be confusing, because we want, well, what do I do? What is the exact step to recovery? Right. What is the exact step to having the perfect physique? There isn't an exact step program. We have to see what works for us. We go to sources that are credible. That might not work for me. Like you said, you might not learn with this person particularly well, but I might learn with this one. And then I try their stuff, it doesn't quite work, so let me try this other thing. And it takes time. And we want everything to be perfect now and clear. That is an unrealistic expectation. And again, when people say you follow this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're going to be recovered, you're going to be healthy, you're going to look really good. It's not that simple. Even that, when it comes to calorie counting and calorie deficit, again, it's still not quite that simple. Because what might be 100 calories for one person with a slightly different microbiome might be 150 to another person. We're complicated. We are just complicated species. We have complicated bodies, complicated brains,
Right.
which means recovering from shame, recovering from addiction, complicated.
Yeah.
Everything when it comes to human beings is not simple. And it's really frustrating. I would love to say this is exactly how to heal. This is exactly how the brain works. And that would sound really nice, but it isn't.
Right.
And that knowledge too, people underestimate that. People underestimate how important it is to recognize the complexity, because we don't like to go back. We learn one thing and we think we have to stay with it. It's okay to say, well, I learned this and now I learned something different. And that I don't actually think is correct anymore.
Yeah.
Go, okay, because we have a loss aversion. I spent all this time working on this exact route. So now I have to stick with it.
Right. Now you're married to it.
Exactly. It's fine to say, let it go.
Yeah.
I'm going to start again. Because if you keep on that route, say you keep on it for 3 years, and 3 years not going to have worked for you. What if you had quit 2 years ago, a year in? The same amount of time has passed, but you're going to be on the right path now.
Right.
It's fine to put that to the side and say, oh, actually, I was wrong. I learned something new now, and this is a better route.
Right. I hate that all my references are workout references, but it's the best because, like, you know, I learned something and I apply it in the gym or whatever, and I'm like, all right, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. And then down the road, like, one thing I've always, working out humbled me in a way. It's like I knew I came into it not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I've maintained the hunger for knowledge this entire time. And it's literally the only topic in my life that has been like that. And so it can be frustrating, but it's also funny on my end where, like, I go into a setting and there's somebody that they lifted in high school and they're like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, hey man, like, I do this every day and I still learn every single day. Like, I still want to get more knowledge. And so I can't tell you how many, like, I'm mortified to think some of the exercises or form that I'm showing people way back when I first started to now, it's like, oh, I would never tell them that then. Not that they would have got hurt. It's just not right. It's not optimal. And so always understanding, like, everybody's body is different. Research is different. They're doing new studies and all that. And it's ever changing. And so you're doing yourself a disservice to think you're an expert or to think that you just know everything on a topic. Like, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to continue to stay hungry for that knowledge and build on it.
We should be lifetime learners. No one is expert enough that they are the expert, always the expert. We can always grow, and we're learning more every day. And to think that you are done learning, you have more to learn than anybody. There's the saying that the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you realize you just don't know anything. Barely scratching the surface. And that's so important because you're always open to new ideas. Just now, we just taught the class at South by Southwest, and we had created a story and then listed the biases that were going on in that story. And one of the class picked out a bias that we hadn't thought of. And if we were going to go, oh no, you don't know, we said, thank you. Thank you for teaching us as the instructor something new. Because you can always learn. Everybody has something to offer. To think that nobody has anything to offer you because you're so well in this subject, on this experience, is extremely arrogant. And I think the working out examples are great because one of the things that I say to people, to get your mind right, get your body right. Because we are an interconnected species. Our mind affects our body affects our mental health. And it's because the body works that way. We know that through the vagal system, the brain is connected to the gut. So what you eat affects the way your brain works. And most of our serotonin is made in our gut, not in our brain.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so serotonin is a lot of the time if people have mental health concerns, there's a lack of serotonin or too much serotonin or an imbalance. Serotonin is made in the stomach, made in the gut.
Really?
And our diets, because of our microbiome, are so strongly connected to our brain health, which is connected to our heart health, which is connected to our overall health. Our stress glands are just above the kidneys. So when cortisol is released, it's released just above the kidneys, the pituitary glands and the adrenal glands. So why do we think that our body as a system starts to fall out with each other when we have emotional turmoil, most mental health difficulties have physical difficulties that come with it. We get stomach aches tied to our mental health. People who have depression and anxiety are prone to IBS because of the way that the body works together. When you don't work out and when you don't keep your body healthy, you create an unhealthy mind. And I always say that this cycle can be confusing and complex, but sometimes we create mental health and we think that we have a mental health disorder, but what we have is a lifestyle that creates a mental health disorder. So if you are someone that is lazy, is unmotivated, eats really bad, and then you're really unhappy, and you think, I have really poor mental health, change those things and then see what happens. And the difficulty with this is mental health is biological too. So often people will have differences in their brain structure, brain functioning, and we know that the brains of someone who is depressed or the brain of someone that is depressed looks different than a brain of someone who is not depressed.
Right.
It's not just a mindset issue. But because it's interconnected, when we change the diet, we allow ourselves to say, when we move these things out of the way, is it still a problem? Is that the issue? Because if the depression and anxiety is still there, when all of those lifestyle changes have gone, well, then there's something else that needs to happen underneath. But we're too quick to run to things like medication to treat the feeling when the behaviors are causing the feeling. We need to remember that it's complicated, that behavior and emotions, they tie into one another. One creates the other, which creates a cycle. So if you're in this negative cycle of behavior and emotions, change the cycle. Because even if you still are suffering really badly, now you do have a positive effect of that feeling of accomplishment. I might not be healed and I might still be struggling, but look what I just did. I just went to the gym. I'm going to feel endorphins. I'm going to feel a sense of accomplishment. So everything else hasn't gone away, but I've increased some of the positive feeling. I feel a little bit better.
Right.
Aren't those moments what we live for? Now we can start to get to the root of what's creating that negative feeling. Hold on to those positive feelings, and they support us in our road to recovery, whether it's recovery from a bad breakup, from addiction, from a loss. Those moments are the things that keep us going. Because when we're in that cycle, when we allow ourselves to stay in that cycle, we think,
right,
what's the purpose? I feel bad and I'm doing bad. And we look at our lives, we look at our behaviors, doing anything. I have nothing really to live for. Change that. Add something to it. Small wins. Write a to-do list. Do things that I might not have done much, but I had a shower today.
Right. Made my bed, whatever it is.
Those small things, they make a difference because we are interconnected. Because behavior affects emotions. Because mental health affects physical health. Physical health affects mental health. Start to make small changes and we start to see small positive influences.
I couldn't agree more. You said so. Everything you said was basically my story of getting sober. Everything you just said. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, and it was about knowing who you are. That was one of the most profound things that happened to me in early recovery. I went and did a men's retreat, and the whole purpose of this 4-day weekend was to discover who you are. And have I told you this before?
No.
Okay. To discover who you are, but not only who you are, but who you are on a level 10. Who you are at your absolute best and who other people see you as too. And so I can remember, like, you could have asked me in early recovery and addiction, who are you? And I could not have given you an answer. Seems like a simple enough question, but who are you truly? Out of a generic answer, I'm Sean, I'm nice, I like to help people, but not who you truly are. And so we went through this weekend and you end up developing this identity statement and you start discovering like who you truly are, who other people see you as, and who you are at your best. And so I walked out of that weekend, like, it changed me in many ways because it made me realize for the first time ever, somebody set a bar for me. It's like now I have this profound understanding of who I am and who other people actually see me as and who I am at the best I could be. And so I think back to all the other times I tried to get sober, and it's like, how could I have ever gotten sober if I didn't even know where the bar was? I didn't know if I was living below it. I didn't know if I was exceeding it ever, any of that stuff. And it's like, man, it's like a bunch of this is a little rat race. Like everybody just running around, bouncing off walls, not knowing because they don't know who they are. And so I try to articulate that with a lot of the people I work with today. And it's, unfortunately they don't have the opportunity to be able to go to that men's retreat because they're having their own experience and all that. But I try to message to them. It's like currently you're in this controlled environment, you're in treatment, start doing some digging, like start trying to understand who you are, like on a very very internal level, like who you are as a person. Who do you want to see yourself as truly? Like who do you want to be?
And even those versions of ourselves, often they're trauma responses that we hide from. So when we don't do that really hard digging and we say, this is who I am, because this is who I've learned to be. And what you see often in people who are healing is a hyper-independence. And I know that this was something I had to really work through, because you have these versions we all have multiple versions of who we are. We're all full of different versions. We have this unhealed child. We have someone who wants love. We have someone who is independent, someone who is strong, all of these. How do we pick them? And when we're not actively working through our emotions, often we will pick things that are trauma responses. Like when I was doing drugs and my parents both kicked me out, I was diagnosed with clinical depression very young. I was struggling. I was lost. I was a kid that needed help. And it took me a long time to realize that I was so angry that nobody nurtured me. And my mom, my whole life was very emotionally and psychologically abusive. Mm-hmm. And I never had anyone reach out a hand to me. And it took only until maybe last year to realize I'd never had anyone help me. I'd never had someone support me. And I'm a very independent person. I've lived alone for a very long time. And that independence was a version of myself that I'd learned, because I'd learned hyper-independence. And I see this all the time. People go, I don't need anyone because I'm independent. We need people. It's just the way the brain works. It's the way we work as humans. We've evolved as a social species. We need people. But we learn hyper-independence. Nobody picked me back up. And I remember saying, there's no situation, there is absolutely no situation you could put me in that I wouldn't survive. Because I've learned to, whatever happens, down on my knees, bloody on the ground, I'm going to get up. I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep going. And we learn that. It's okay to stay down. And I had said for such a long time, I haven't been in a relationship for a very long time. And I'd said, because I'm so independent, I don't need anyone. I don't want anyone. And because we think we won't get it, we say, I don't want it. We think that I don't deserve this, or I was never taught this, so I don't want it. And it's so much easier to say, I don't want it, instead of, I don't know how to get it. I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to have someone nurture. I don't know how to accept love. I don't know how to accept support. So we go, I don't want support. And we just push ourselves into this corner. I did that for such a long time. And people would say to me, a relationship? A relationship? I don't need love from someone else. I got enough in here for myself. I'm healed, I'm growing. Look at my career. Look at all these things I'm doing. You think I need another person in my life? They're just going to hold me down. And that's a trauma response, because we all need someone. We all need love. And it was only really when I started to accept that this person that I thought, when you said find those versions of yourself, my version of me was, I am independent. Mm-hmm. This is my me. This is the self that I like. Someone who doesn't need anyone. Someone who is strong. Someone who is uncaring, unbothered. So this is a version of me I'm going to feed. I'm going to play into that. That was a trauma response. And I fed it. And I kept working with that. And it didn't do me any good in the long run. And it was only really when I reflected on it and I'm like, this me doesn't feel comfortable. Doesn't actually feel like an authentic me, but it feels like the ideal me, because we want this, like you said, this, strong person, particularly people in law enforcement. And, I'm this big, strong guy. I have no shame. So we want that independent, strong me, and not necessarily the authentic me. Mm-hmm. So it was when I sat down and I had a conversation with my dad, and I said to him, you know what? I think I do want someone in my life. I think I want someone to nurture me. I think I want to come home and I want to put that independence on the door. I think I want to come home to someone who makes me feel safe instead of just blindly saying, I don't need anybody. That's a really hard thing to come to terms with, because I spent years with this is me. This me that I found, this ideal me, is an independent me. It's really hard to come to terms with that loss aversion. I wasted all this time, and that isn't me that I want. You can still be independent and want someone and need love, but it wasn't the me that I had built up, and this ideal me that I kept working towards and thinking, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. And I had to come to terms with that and say, maybe in strength is a little weakness. Maybe in independence is a little love. Being independent doesn't mean being toxically hyper-independent. It's like being strong doesn't mean being strong all the time. Being healed doesn't exist. Healing is the only state that we can ask for, because there's got to be a bit of weakness in there, because that's how we work as human beings. And it was at that point that I realized the version of me is an imperfect me, had these standards, this person that doesn't stop working and will work themselves to the ground, this person who is independent and needs no one. What I wanted was this curated, perfect version of what I thought success was, because I watched all these things about strong, successful women, and I so desperately wanted that. And I never had any role models of what should be. So I created this version that was so toxic that I was trying to grow into, and stepping away from that and saying, me is imperfect. Myself is flawed. Fine. Myself as someone who is learning. Myself as someone healing and who is growing and who is better than yesterday, but not perfect.
That was great. I can't, Dr. Abbie, I can't thank you enough. You come on here and you leave my head so full with stuff to sit there.
To me, I think about our conversation.
So do I. I sit there and I've replayed what we talked about the first time for weeks. Now I know you've given me material for the next couple of weeks to chew on. I'll be honest, I have not started reading your book, but after today, tomorrow morning will be my first pages of the book. I definitely need to read it. It's been sitting on my counter needing to read since I got it, but
I'm biased, but I think that is a good book.
No, you have my word. I'm starting tomorrow. I can't thank you enough. I'm so glad that we finally got together in person. If you are ever in Texas again, let me know. If not, we'll have to come to Florida and see you in your element. We could do that.